Hi, welcome to Drama Means. We're talking about the 2024 Chinese drama, The Double. Today, drama means revenge, drama means schemes, and drama means flirting with daggers in every word.
So first, a little bit of a summary. A young woman literally crawls out of her would-be grave after her husband tries to bury her alive. To exact revenge, she must engage in a high-stakes game of lies and deception inside the nation's royal court, all while assuming the identity of a fallen friend.
So this is another one that Youku got me. I keep having to buy these fast-track passes.
You're such a sucker.
I'm such a sucker. So, the Different Princess got me to get the Youku subscription. Unknown got me to buy the finale fast track. And now the double. Although, now that I think about it, it was about the same price for 2 episodes for Unknown. And then it's also $2.99 to get the 4 episodes.
I still think it's highway robbery. I don't like this idea of pay more to get the episodes sooner. No, just give me the damn episodes.
It is frustrating, and I was wondering because it was such a weird way how they were releasing each episode. So it was some days it would be, 2 episodes, and then some days it would be 1 episode, and then at the end, weekends were 1 episode a day. And then when it first started, it was I don't know, 4 or 6 or whatever episodes a week, and then it just it flew by. But yeah, I paid that extra $2.99 for the last 4 episodes.
I mean, it does say something about the drama, at least, though, because usually with these 40-episode, costume drama epics, by, episode 25, I'm okay, wrap it up already. And the fact you're going into episode 36 going, all right, I need to watch the last 4 right now, says a lot about the quality of this particular drama.
Yeah, it was one of those that I didn't really know much about it. I saw the trailer, and the trailer looked dark and just gritty. And I sent it to my friend, and she actually texts back. And of course, she's been trying to learn Chinese, and she literally says, "This one looks like there's a lot of da," which means da is hitting.
Okay.
And so I don't even know if she's talking about fighting, hitting, or literally beating.
I mean, there was a lot of beatings.
Yes. So, but that I knew nothing about it previously, and then I just started watching it because it did seem a little darker, and in the preview was oh yeah, the husband buries her alive. That's crazy. And so that was what intrigued me. And then watching it every day as it airs, it was one of the dramas that I wake up every morning and I'm I have to watch this first, no matter whatever I do afterward is whatever I do, but I have to watch the newest episodes right away as it's airing. And I didn't get tired of it. I was very okay, what's next? I gotta watch it. It was weird because my emotions were up and down while watching this, because I was I was very sad when there wasn't more to watch.
Right. I mean, it's very complex. And I think it kind of reminds me of Game of Thrones a little bit in how the tone is pretty dark for most of it. And it just feels a little more grown up than a lot of the other costume dramas. It doesn't feel like everything is on the surface. It feels like you have to kind of pay attention to this one a little bit in a way that maybe you don't have to in other costume dramas. So it does feel I don't know, it just felt more, I don't want to use the word mature, but it did feel a little more mature than some of these other costume dramas that just feel a little cartoony, and I get a little aggravated at them after a while. I'm come on, get to it. But this one felt it moved, and it was dark, and it was intriguing, and the relationships and everything was just a shade more complex.
It's just a little bit reminiscent of The Count of Monte Cristo,
which is one of my favorite books of all time.
because it's a long freaking book.
It's like a massive book. I mean, it's written at a time where I think those dudes were paid by the word, so they just wrote these epically long books. But Dumas was one of those classic authors that I felt like the stories really moved. And so, but I think the only, obviously, like, the parallels here are, assuming someone else's identity to kind of return to the court. Like, it's a very, high society drama in the way that Count of Monte Cristo was as well, is that he comes back. The only difference, and I think they did a really good job of it in this, is that in the Count of Monte Cristo, he's gone forever. He's gone for a very, very long time. And Dumas paints this picture of when he sees himself in the mirror after being, incarcerated and, basically, buried in this prison. He can't even recognize the man who looks at him from the mirror. And so when he makes his return, they kind of play on that. Like, no one recognizes him. No one goes, oh, that's Edmond Dantes. Like, we know who that is. In this, they kind of play on the fact that she looks like the character, and like her husband like recognizes her, like it's a ghost walking into the banquet when he first sees her, and the stepmom and everyone. And then they have to kind of like, oh no, it's just a coincidence. It's just a coincidence. But they keep playing on this identity thing in a smart way, I think, because they didn't make her missing for 20 years.
Yeah. I know a lot of people have a hard time because they don't think it's believable, because like she literally looks like, the dead wife or whatever. But like, it's not a matter of like, she's not banking like, oh, they're not going to recognize me. Of course they're going to recognize me. I look like myself. She's banking on the fact that once this really high up official claims that she's his daughter, no one else can say otherwise.
No, it's the game. It's part of this game. It's very calculated. And so she's using that. Like, it's not an accident she makes her appearance to her, like, ex-husband. I'll call her the ex-husband, because you tried to murder her. It's not it's a very public setting the first time he sees her. And so he can't just go, you!
I killed you!
Yeah, like it's just, he's stuck.
Yeah.
And the fact that she's being introduced as this other person, it's not like he's just like, no. Or like, oh, I don't recognize her. Like, it's just complicated because he's like, well, okay, on one hand, if I say something, this other guy is like, what are you talking about? This is my daughter. So now you're going against a court official, and we all know in these costume dramas, speaking out against anyone usually gets you killed. Like, in all cases. You go to a meeting room, and then you're like, I believe the opposite of what's being said, and then they slit your throat.
And that's why it makes her, like, setting up this trap works so well, is because he is stuck. He can't say anything, because if he says anything, it's like, hey, I'm turning myself in.
Yeah, he's completely stuck.
Yeah. I do have to say, though, apparently, I actually did not read the original novel. It's based off of a book. But someone online had mentioned that in the original novel, her character wasn't just assuming someone's identity. It was that it was like a rebirth. So she had, died from being killed by her husband, and then she basically ends up in the body of, Zhang Li. Mm-hmm. In which I think Zhang Li had drowned or something like this. But the thing is, that story we've seen so many times in so many different books, dramas, stories, different countries' stories. It's all been done. And so I'm really glad that they didn't, or they changed it in order for it to not be like a transmigration, a rebirth story. I much like the connivingness of her actually taking this person's identity.
Well, it's one of those things that, like, when you're setting out to put this story together, and, like, let's say we were all in a writer's room, someone in the writer's room would be like, well, here's the problem. She looks like herself, and that's going to be a problem for the story. And instead of it being a problem for the story, they kind of weaponized it for the story. So you take what you perceive as the kind of weaknesses of your story and go, okay, actually, how do we use this weakness of the story to our advantage? And I think it was a smart adaptation because, first of all, with those transmigration things, the thing that always gets me is we start the story and we're looking at our actor, our lead actor. And now our lead actor is now into a new body. But they still look like our lead actor. But to the characters, they look like the other actor that we saw. Like in a book, it works better because you can just imagine it. But on screen, it starts being like, we have to do those dumb scenes where she like looks at her reflection and it's someone else staring back at her. And it's like, ugh. Like, I hate those because
oh my God.
I just wanted to be like, no, that's the actor and that's who I'm looking at and that's who the characters see. Like, it's just very simple. I'm a simple-minded human.
I'm totally watching something exactly like that. It's called The Stand-In. It's that Thai BL.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, where the one guy gets hit over the head with the bat.
Yeah, and I hate those. I just don't like those. They always make me feel a little weird because I'm like, oh, right, because they're actually looking at a different face than the audience is looking at. It's a little like Quantum Leapy, where like, you know, I'm looking at Scott Bakula, but everyone else is like looking at like this black jazz musician from the 1920s. And I'm like, so he has to keep looking in the mirror to remind me that, oh, that's right, he's a black jazz musician from the 20s.
Yeah. Anyway, so I welcome that change. I think it works well. Maybe some people think it's like convoluted, you know, but I do because she set it up well in terms of like this higher government official's daughter died at the hands of this lady that ran this convent, right?
Mm-hmm.
Of course she would be punished and killed. So then she can't claim that she, you know, isn't Zhangli.
Yeah, no, she's pushed these people into this corner, and now it makes it more believable, and it makes it a tactical decision, and not just, oh, I hope no one recognizes me, you know? She knows what she's doing when she goes back. She knows the reaction she's going to get, and she understands how she needs to play it.
Yeah, so like she's like this master at manipulating people,
mm-hmm.
which I really enjoy for your like lead character because a lot of people love anti-hero and they're like manipulative in like a kind of a bad way, right? But you're really rooting for her like in all the scheming. She doesn't like hurt those who don't deserve to be hurt.
Mm-hmm.
So she's still like a good person, but she is like kind of fucking scary.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't really believe in anti-heroes, so like I think she's just the hero of the story. But the fact that she can play the bad guy's game better than they can play it, and so she's like, oh, I didn't realize we were playing a game where you hit someone in the face with a shovel and bury them alive. Oh, you want to play that game? Let's do it. And then she comes back and she has, 25 moves thought out. And it's not that she's like omnipotent and just has every move at her disposal. She's just intelligent. And she like makes the calculations. And then when things don't quite go her way, she has to like reassess and scramble. So it's not just all kind of thought out and easy. There's a struggle, but it feels like a struggle by an intelligent person, not just by, someone who's in way over their head and just bumbling. And on that same kind of vein is, I think the writers and director of this show understood move, counter move really, really well. Like she would make a move and the bad guys would counter move. And then even in, the relationship between the princess and her husband, the princess, when she gets married or she's supposed to get married to the Lee brother, and like she like emasculates him, and that's her move. And then he goes back and he's like, no, I don't like that. And so he kind of leverages her because it's like, hey, if you don't marry me, like you're screwed. And so like, and then she comes back over the top of like, no. And like they go back and forth. And so everyone always has a counter move to everyone else's move in every single story. And so you're making all these characters very active. And they understood that really, really well in this drama in a way that a lot of costume dramas don't do. I think a lot of costume dramas have the lead character be smart, and then the bad guys are always kind of scrambling and then just relying on the fact that they're in power, and then they can cheat and they can just lock up and murder whoever they want with no consequences. But they don't ever do any counter move that's like intelligent or smart. They just kind of stroke their beard and throw them in jail. But it felt like everyone here had to be smart in order to participate in this game, which I really appreciated.
Yeah, I agree. And it's just so satisfying to watch. Like, it's satisfying to watch because you are on with the ride.
Mm-hmm.
And you're like rooting for her and you want her to succeed and you're just kind of waiting for things to unravel. So like I love the fact that Duke Su is like, he just likes to sit back and watch. And like he's like, "Oh yeah, just, you know, what kind of play are you putting on now?" kind of thing. And I feel like that also. Like I'm just waiting. I'm like, "Oh yeah, how is this going to happen? How is it going to unravel? And like, how are they going to, you know, counterattack and all these things?" And it's just so fun to watch.
Well, the fact that he goes to the banquet at the beginning, the kind of the sisters coming out, just as a, oh, I bet some drama going to happen there. Like, he's not invited. He's not supposed to be there. He's like, you know what? If I can't go to the play, I'm going to go to a real drama.
Yeah. It's like, I'm just here to eat some melon, you know, sip some tea. I love that.
You need to explain this melon thing. Like eats, like the watermelon eater thing. I was like, what?
It's just literally in Chinese, it's 吃瓜. And it's just like, it actually, I think it's more derived from like eating the melon seeds. Because like sunflower seeds, like when you're like, watching a show, you're like, you know, it's like eating popcorn kind of.
Yeah, it's eating popcorn, right? At the movies.
Yeah.
Okay.
But then after, you know, like after a while, they just cut off the seeds, the word of the seeds part, and it's just 吃瓜, which literally means just eat melon. And so like when you're like kind of nosy and you want to get in other people's business and you're just there to sip some tea, that's just eating some melon.
Okay, yeah, it's like get your popcorn ready.
Yeah.
Like literally, nom, 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 like just like, oh, what's happening? What's the show? No, yeah. I like he was there for the drama, like from the beginning, and then, but unlike, we talked a little bit about this, of the other role this actor played in Scent of Time.
Yeah, Scent of Time.
In that, he kind of was the same character at the beginning, where he kind of sat back and watched and like observed. He was always sitting in his like second floor balcony observing everything. But like that character never did shit. Like he was just like, look how smart I am by sitting up in this balcony and watching and narrating what's going on below. But I'm like, hey, asshole, now you have to do something. Like, and he just felt so inactive. Where this character gets his hands dirty and gets in the muck real quick.
Yeah.
And so he doesn't just sit back the whole show and eat melon.
Yeah. The thing is, I also really liked that in the beginning, he's like observing her and like kind of testing to see if she's like worthy to like bring to his side or like, you know. And so he doesn't always like lend that helping hand right away. Mm-hmm. And then he also has like kind of a, well, at first it was curious, like, oh, how is she gonna get herself out of this situation? But then it starts being like, I trust that she's just gonna be able to get herself out of this situation. I don't need to lift a finger because she's totally capable of getting herself out. And I love that, like, because in a lot of other dramas, it's so much like, oh, this really strong woman that's super smart, and then she does things, but then she needs the guy to come in and save the day kind of thing. And, like, she doesn't really need that.
No, there's very little damseling of her.
Yeah.
In this, I think, in a smart way. They kind of do it near the end a little bit, when she's, like, taken hostage. But even that isn't the traditional damsel in distress kind of thing. And so I do think they make her very capable. And he understands how capable she is. And it's kind of what he likes about her.
Yeah. And I just love their, like, understanding for each other. Mm-hmm. Like, they understand where they belong in the situation. They understand what the other person thinks of themselves. It's just, I just love this. This is so, like, it's like a weird kind of unhealthy situation, but their relationship feels very healthy.
Mm-hmm. They feel like good dance partners.
Yeah.
Is that a weird analogy to make?
Oh my god. So, when they talk to each other, it always feels like they're like playing chess, right? And so like every word, like the way that they emphasize different things, I don't know how they structure the sentence, I guess. it does feel like they're dancing, but I don't know if you notice that when they have those moments, the song that always comes on is like a waltz.
Mm-hmm.
So they kind of paint it as like, as they're interacting, it feels like they're doing a waltz.
Mm-hmm.
I personally think it's more of a tango, and I really wish that they had put a tango kind of song in as they're like interacting and always playing these kind of mind games, and like every word that they say to each other has like an underlying meaning. It just really feels like they're doing a tango rather than a waltz.
Well, it's one of those things. I think I'm trying to remember the exact term, but there's a screenwriting term which I think it's called 90-degree dialogue, or is it 45-degree dialogue? It's one of those degree dialogues, but basically what it is rather than having two characters exchange opposite, like 180 degrees, like I say yes, you say no, I ask you a question, you answer it, you have characters who are almost talking past each other. So they're not just, where were you tonight? I was out. Like, where were you tonight? The moon was bright. And you're like, there's kind of like an intelligence of like, no, I understand what you're doing by asking me where I was. I'm going, and so like, it is a dance. And I think really good dialogue, a lot of times, if you read scripts, plays by this 90-degree dialogue rule, that don't just have your characters answer each other and say the expected thing. Get inside their heads and figure out from their perspective, because it's a lot more like humans talk. Like, we kind of talk past each other a lot when we're conversing, especially if we're doing kind of this dance of having our own agenda. And I think it's one of the hallmarks of very well-written dialogue is picking out those things. And I think between the two of them, you really see it.
Yeah. So, it's sexy as fuck.
and it doesn't have to be heavy-handed to be sexy, though. Like, just them being in a scene together is sexy now, because it feels like they're always measuring each other.
Yeah.
And they're always seeing if they're worthy of each other in a kind of cute rivalry but bondy way. It's interesting, it's complex, it's fun to watch.
Yeah. And that's the thing, like, a lot of people I know like want that straightforward romance where, they just love each other all the time, and they say it all the time, and they say how beautiful each other are, and it's just like, yeah.
She trips and falls and he catches her, and then they stare into each other's eyes.
I mean, I think they did have one of those scenes. I can't remember.
I don't remember. But that wasn't the majority of their relationship.
No. I don't remember if that happened or not, or I'm just thinking it did because it happens in every single drama. But I know, I get it. People really like the romancy, fluffy stuff, but I love this, like, kind of mature. I think one of my favorite things is, like, when the characters really understand each other.
Mm-hmm.
It's just, like, when they, like, literally can finish each other's sentences and knows what each other thinks, and they don't have to, like, they don't have to ask. They just know. And then when they know, they don't have to say it out. They just accept it. Like, those are my favorite types of relationships. And they definitely have it. And that's why it's so envious for me. And it's so cute when they do have those little interactions. And it's just like, this is what romance is. This is the romance that I, like, crave.
Well, for me, it's about screaming. I always hate when characters yell too much, because if you spend the entire time screaming, then when you need to scream, no one listens, right? It's a little bit Boy Who Cried Wolf. And I think the same goes for anything. Like, when I say screaming in a romantic sense, it's the I love you, I love you, I love you. And if you do that in every scene, it stops meaning anything. But in this, because they withhold these cute moments for you for so long, when they finally give it to you, they feel very loud. They feel very impactful. And so they're not screaming the romance at you in every scene. They're making you really sit up and pay attention to when it happens. And I think that's so much harder to do and so much more rewarding when you get it right because you do feel the moments now rather than just in every scene. I love you. Oh my God, I love you and cherish you. Oh, let me take you to this field of flowers and then let me watch the sunset with you and then let's sit on the rooftop and cuddle. And you're like, okay, I get it. They're into each other. But it's just, you're just screaming romance at me in every scene. After a while, none of it means anything.
So I also really like how the pacing is. I didn't feel like this drama dragged. I was in it. And I don't know if it's because I was like watching the new episodes every single day. So it didn't feel like, I think a lot of times when people binge dramas, like it gets a little tiring because you're watching it for so long.
Mm-hmm.
And then you might find it like it's dragging, right? But for me, I didn't find it dragging at all. And I really enjoyed they solve their obstacles in a very quick way, and they don't really spend too much time doing things over and over and over again.
Yeah, it doesn't feel one note. It feels like they're always pushing the story forward.
Yes.
Which is important because I think the secret to good dramatic storytelling is always being kind of one step ahead of your audience. Of don't tell a story until everyone's sick of it and then move on. Always pull your reveals the episode before anyone expects you to. Always pull your twists the episode before everyone expects you to. That's what makes really good shows, and that's what feels like propulsive pacing. When the audience isn't going all right, I know that's the bad guy, please just turn over that card and show us the twist already. But you're moving through the show so that each move feels smart, because my little audience brain hasn't gotten there yet. I'm still hung up on this thing over here, and now you've moved past it, and by the time I catch up, you've moved on to the next thing, and so it keeps me leaning forward. And I think this show does a better job than most of that.
I also there are a lot of characters in here, the evil characters, the stepmom, and the magistrate that basically took over for Shi Fangfei's dad, right? The thing is, in most dramas, those characters come back over and over and over again, and they keep doing stupid shit, and you're just so annoyed, and then Ryan goes, chop his head off, right? And so then...
That's the new barometer for when I get frustrated with some characters. I'm like, all right, they can be beheaded now. Chop their heads off now.
Yeah. And so, but with this one, it's just they solve the issue so fast. And then the annoying characters aren't on screen that often and for that long of a time. So then you kind of forget about them, and you're like, okay, I got that break from them. So then when they do reappear, you're like, oh yeah. And then they get rid of them immediately. And then it's just oh, that's nice. And it's just kind of refreshing. It just flows and it just moves, and you're not oh, I'm so sick of this character. I can't wait till they die. I hate them. And you're pulling your hair out,
I didn't call for anybody's head until episode 37. I was okay, the princess can get her head chopped off now. But that was really late. I was they did a pretty good job, because she's probably the most conniving, over the top type character. Even though I do think she was pretty effective, she's the closest thing I think where you start to go, all right, I'm sick of this flavor. Spoiled brat. But she's also being pulled in a bunch of directions, but then she's also counter moving herself. So she doesn't feel intelligent as much as the other characters, but she always has a move in her pocket. So it's not just the same note of let me fuck with you in the same way I fucked with you in the last scene. And then it's ugh, I'm so sick of this flavor of ice cream. Please give me something else.
Yeah. So I think a lot of people might not like the stepmom.
Well, she's not supposed to be likable.
Yes, she's not supposed to be likable.
She's a bitch.
And I think she did a great job. So I've been watching Jo Chen, the woman that plays the stepmom, since she was in her 20s.
Uh-huh.
You know what I mean? And so, she was a really prominent Taiwanese actress before she kind of started working in Chinese productions and stuff like that. And she's usually the lead in most things. And so to watch her be the villain. I don't know if I've ever seen her play a villain character. But I think she does really well. And I know they, like, even with the princess and the stepmom, and they kind of, like, they try to give them a little bit of, not redeemable qualities, but, like, you feel bad for them because they have had things rough, too. And also I feel like they had kind of they made a parallel between the princess and Zhang Ni, or Shi Fangfei's character. So it's kind of like they're trying to pull your heartstrings for those characters.
They're not overdoing it either, because they know we're not going to feel that bad, but they're doing it enough to let us understand, oh, these are fully functioning human being characters. Like, these are the heroes of their own story, and they're the victims of their own circumstance as well. And I think that's the key to this one and most good dramas, is like, the villains are the heroes of their own story, and the heroes are the heroes of their own story, and they want different things, and that's where the conflict all comes. And no one is just a cookie cutter, I'm evil for evil's sake. Like, everyone has a reason for doing what they're doing. And not that they're good reasons, and not that they behave well, but I look at it less of like pulling at my heartstrings with those characters, and more just trying to make them well-rounded and not just one-dimensional. And so, like, don't ask me to cry for those characters, but do ask me to try to understand their point of view, even if I don't agree with it, because then it just makes everything richer.
Yeah. So I think Youku on Instagram, or basically all the social media, have put out like a poll on like, should Zhang Li's dad be like forgiven? And literally every single comment is no.
No, he's a piece of shit.
Yeah. The thing is, I feel like they redeemed his character in the end. I don't know if it's like, I don't think he should be forgiven, but I do think like, you don't hate him like you hated him in the beginning. Like, there was just like, yes, he was an idiot and he just let this woman like run his life, and then like decide that his 8-year-old daughter should be sent up to this mountain, and then like literally for 10 years ignored her and like didn't visit her, didn't write to her, didn't even think about her.
Yeah, that's bad parenting.
That's real bad parenting. And then after she comes back, like, he's so like easily swayed and easily like talked into him like questioning her, and then in the end he's like, I knew what was going on, I just didn't have the time to deal with it. And I'm like, no, bitch.
No. You did not know.
No, I like it, but it's hard to not know because it seems so blatant and all the shit that got pulled,
Yeah, eventually, but like he ain't the sharpest knife in the drawer either. And he doesn't have a #1 dad trophy. Like, none of his kids ever bought him that for Father's Day.
Yeah, anyway.
But I do think the villains in this are just well-drawn characters. And I think for the most part, really well acted. Like, you're supposed to hate the bad guys. You're supposed to look at the husband and hate him the whole way through. But the actor never let his performance get really over the top and cartoon. And it's just, I don't know. There's something about a really good villain that helps a story. And he's one of the better ones I think we've seen in one of these costume dramas. Just, it's not that I loved the actor. Like, I looked at him like, oh, I want him on screen. But like, when he's on screen, he always had purpose. And he always, again, had a move. And we understood his story, how he thought he was forced into this corner and was doing the right thing. But I'm like, I don't know. Well done, I think. You hated him in the way you're supposed to hate a villain. Yeah,
definitely. He was definitely despicable, but he wasn't, like, annoying, in my opinion. And he did definitely, like, for me, I think his acting was great in it. Sometimes, his, like, evil glare was a little too glary. I don't know.
Yeah. There's like, the ones directly looking into the camera sometimes. I was like, oh, that's...
That's, like, over the top.
Yeah.
But that's definitely a director thing. Like, I don't know, whichever director that's because I think they have 3 directors listed. Whichever the director is that really likes his like close-up haircut shots.
Mm-hmm. The Warner Brothers haircut.
Yeah. So it's just he really likes those, and he really likes the pushing in, and then like, you know, the actor talking straight to the camera shots.
I call it the Hannibal Lecter shot, because like Jonathan Demme did a lot of it in Silence of the Lambs, where you're on, you know, the character is dead center in the frame, and you're giving them that haircut where their forehead's half cut off, and it's the eyes just into the camera, like looking into the soul. And it's so effective with Hannibal Lecter, because he's always looking into the soul of Clarice and the audience. And so I get it. It does give kind of a sophisticated intelligence to the character, but I think they used it a lot.
Well, I mean, like, you know, 40 episodes is a lot, right? So, and it was just very favorited.
Yeah. It was one of their go-to shots with him especially.
Yeah. But again, like, I found the acting really good. It just all really worked well. So I actually didn't really think very highly of Wang Xing Yue in Scent of Time. I don't know if it's just the character or like his character didn't give him much to do with his, you know, both his emotions, and honestly, I didn't find him that attractive in that. But like in this one, the character was just so much more appealing. He had way more, you know, like acting chops to do, and also I think like being paired up with Wu Jing Yan, like she's known for her acting, right? And so having to be, you know, the counterpart to such a good actress, that he had to up his game too. And also I think the story's just better in general. But like there are moments where he's like so cold and sexy, and I normally do not like toxic men, and he starts out kind of toxic, and then you find out he's not that toxic, but like just like that dangerous man, like I am not a fan of.
Right.
But I found him so sexy in this character, so sexy. But then there are those moments, and it's just literally like Zhang Li would say something that like kind of claims that she's jealous, you know, and then he has to explain herself, and just the tiny littlest like fleck in his eye, right? And you know how much I like eye acting. This tiny little fleck in his eye that's just like the cuteness and the little sulking, like, please don't be mad at me towards her. Mm-hmm. And it's so subtle, but it's so well done. And I'm just like, yeah, he's good. And he's like he was casted really well. So
I think it's material. I think in this particular character, with this director and this material, he was given things to chew on and scenes and moves to make and emotions to play and subtlety to play. They were giving him things to find as an actor. And in Scent of Time, I don't think they gave him anything to work with. It really felt like the direction in every scene of that show was like, be calm and cool. Yep, just keep being cool. And here it just felt like he had things to act. And some actors do need really strong directors to pull performances out of them, to get the best out of them.
I think the main director in this one is also the main director in Scent of Time.
Really?
Yeah.
Ugh. How?
Well, again, this one had 3 directors listed. Only one of them was the one that worked on Scent of Time. But honestly, tone-wise, it's the same.
No, tone-wise, it's similar, but I think just...
But then that leads you to original content.
Well, yeah, I mean, the writing and the premise and the care that went into every single character here that didn't go into Scent of Time at all, where I felt nothing for anyone on screen at any time at all. I think here... There's a reason, like, you look at the husband's character, and he's the villain, but you're like, wow, really good job. So you can actually, like, appreciate it because it's complex, and his role was well played. And you look at, you know, the 2 leads and how they interact together, and you know, his little buddies, his right and left hand man. Like, you know, you just kind of start appreciating everybody because they have characters, they have roles. We're just like, oh man, I kind of understand where everyone's coming from. It's richly drawn in a way that the other one wasn't. So maybe it's a difference, less directing and more just, you know, the material itself.
There's actually very little parts of their, like, interaction where it's, like, romance. But I freaking ate up every little drop of their romance.
I mean, but again, they weren't screaming it at you. So when they gave it to you, you were, like, thirsty for it. You were like, oh yeah, I want this now.
But I just love how the development was. It went from her being completely scared of him and just found him, like, dangerous. And she's like, I have to avoid him. He's scary. Like, any wrong move in front of him and I can die. Right? And it's just, it goes from that to kind of hesitantly, like, receiving some of his, like, pointers and his help and stuff. But still, like, I should avoid him at all costs. You know? And then, like, then she kind of realizes, like, he could possibly be an ally. She's unsure about him. But, you know, and then finally she's like, I am willingly going to be your pawn. I know you want me to be your pawn. I've always been your pawn, but I am offering myself as your pawn, you know. Mm-hmm. And it's just, every interaction, and I'm like, I think my first thing I said to you was like, they are literally mind fucking right now.
Well, they're word fucking.
Well, they're word fucking, for sure. But, like, they're, like, playing the strategic, like, schemes and stuff. And that's, like, they're mind fucking. They're playing chess every time they talk to each other, like, in their brains.
He's like, hey, baby, bring that sexy brain over here.
Which, you know, I feel like people should do more.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, I just really like their build and their development. And it just kind of went with them, like, I love that they just started scheming together and everyone's like, well, what's your plan next? And then she's like, what do you have in store? You know, kind of like, it's like almost the equivalent of, like, in Destined, their little, like, midnight powwow kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it felt similar to that.
Yeah. And they're always, like, discussing their plans and, like, how they're gonna scheme against other people. Like, a really fucking dangerous couple here. But, yeah. And then their flirtiness. I love the flirtiness. The flirtiness is so cute.
I mean, I would understand the criticism, and I'm sure I didn't read any of the online comments, but I'm sure the comments were like, there's not enough romance, and there's not enough flirting, and there's not enough hand-holding and gazing into each other's eyes. Because it was pretty light. Like, it was not the main thrust of this show.
It was light, but I don't think it's as light as people claim. Like, there are some really good moments in it. Like, the first time, like, I mean, she had gotten a little bit jealous beforehand, but the first time it really showed and she, like, let herself is when she got drunk and it's, like, raining, you know, and they're, like, in the middle of the street, and she's, like, for the first time, it feels like, oh, she can freely say whatever she wants, and the first thing she wants to say is that he's really handsome, and then she's like, do you know you're handsome? You know, and then, like, they kind of prance in the street in the rain together, and it's like, this is freaking romance. That's, like, very strong romance. And then, of course, he carries her in the rain back to, you know, her house or whatever. And so it's just like, it's there, man. It's fucking there.
Yeah, I think it's there. I do think it's on the lighter side, but I don't mind that. I think it's, again, like, when they do it, it really stands out. Like, that scene, like, pops off the screen because it's almost out of character because she's so guarded and so, you know, plays her cards very carefully. And for her to open up like that in that moment is very rare in the show. So then it just stands out and it means something for us.
Yeah. Yeah. And another part that really stood out for me was like his immediate fear that like she was going to get taken away. It's the scene where she gets put into jail and then the husband comes back and like gets her out of jail and basically like proposes that the king kind of make a decree for their marriage, right? And then Duke Su is out there and of course he like takes her away instead of the husband. And then he just holds on to her hand so tightly. And then the fear in his eyes, it's just like, that was such a good scene. And that was like, it was small and simple, but it really, for me, showcased his acting in it. And it's just like, because there was a very complex look he was giving, and it was the fear and like the love that he has for her. It was just there's so many different emotions in that one look. So if anyone like missed it, definitely go back and rewatch that. But yeah, that just shows how like complex the characters are.
Well, I think all of the characters from top to bottom, they did a good job of trying to, again, not make them one note, to try to give them point of view on the world around them. And no one was just a very stock, idiot. Like the classic moron emperor who just listens to his sniveling secretary, his eunuch, who's just like, hey, sir, you should do this really dumb thing. And he's like, oh, shut up. Like, they didn't have that in this. I thought, like...
Or there's some dramas where it's like the really evil king.
Yeah.
But like I think he was really good in this in terms of like he was always in on it. He knew the situation. Like the other side, like the princess's side, never knew that he was like, he knew everything was going on. But he knew that everything was going on. And he knew that his consort, had some shady shit going on with with the maid or whatever.
Yeah. Well, it feels like normally the emperor in these shows has two flavors. He either super evil and conniving and horrible, or so naive. And he kind of played naive from time to time, but he was not. He was always like, no, I get it that you're trying to overthrow me. I'm not stupid. Even though you may think I'm some kind of dork that doesn't belong on the throne. Like, I'm not a moron. And so, like, it was just nice to not have to deal with that dynamic with either just super overbearing tyrant or naive, like, man-child.
Yeah. So that was good. I really liked that he was part of the scheming too. Mm-hmm. On the good side, of course.
And by the end, like, he puts his trust in all of the right people, and he kind of excluded all of the snivelly guys. Like, he knew when he was having smoke blown at him by these officials. And he's like, all right, I can't trust you, so you're no longer in the inner circle. And by the end, his inner circle is all there for him, like willing to die for him, including the consort. Like everyone is just, no, we have a loyalty to you because you're not an idiot emperor.
Yeah. And the thing is, like, the consort has several times pulled, like, you need to do this and you need to do that, kind of thing. And he knows it. He sees it and he's like, okay, how do I, like, appease her and also, like, not really do what they want me to do? And it's again, a very well-rounded character.
Yeah, and it was such a breath of fresh air. You know what else was a breath of fresh air? Maybe my favorite part in the whole drama.
Uh-huh.
My favorite character that didn't exist in this is the Empress Dowager, I fucking hate in all of these palace dramas where this old bitch who used to be married to the emperor, and now there's a new emperor, it's like her son or whatever, but then she still has all this crazy power and is also dumb as a brick 90% of the time. I hate this character more than any other character in this genre. And they didn't have one in this. And I was so happy.
More happy than when that guy got beheaded?
Well, let's just not get ahead of ourselves. But I'm just like, I just don't understand, like, in so many of these dramas, like, the end-all, be-all word of, like, you have, like, the tyrant emperor who, like, murders people, but he still listens to his mommy. Like, it's just like, why does she wield so much power? Why does this old lady wield so much power in these dramas? Like, it's always so disproportionate to me, where all these characters who are involved in government affairs, and, like, a retired lady comes down, and they're like, oh, man, you know who we can't piss off? A retired lady. I'm like, oh, I don't get it. I understand it's a cultural thing or something that I'm not understanding, but fuck, I hate that character.
Well, I mean, like, usually they're retired, but then they still have so much, like, people power.
No, I know, but, like, they're always, like, tiptoeing around, and they have to make sure they appease the Empress Dowager. We gotta make sure that she's, like, okay. We gotta, like, bring her flowers and pat her on the head and tell her she's pretty. And, like, oh, if we do this, then the Empress... Fuck you, you're the Emperor! Do something!
Yeah.
Every time those characters pop up on the screen in these dramas, I just go, ugh.
You know what? Most of the old ladies in this drama weren't bad.
No, they weren't. They weren't, like, meddling for meddling's sake. And, like, because, like, the grandmother of that, because she was kind of, like, the matriarch of the family, right?
Yeah.
Like, she kind of was the one who was the most level-headed.
Well, she was always on her side, actually, and she saw through. The thing is, again, she was also one of the people that didn't visit her and didn't...
Right.
You
Yeah,
know.
also not a good person. Let's just be clear, everyone in that family is kind of dog shit.
Yeah, but after she returned, she was always on her side, you know, and then she blames herself for letting them, you know, do what they did. Which is like, yes, you feel bad. You should have fucking known better. But I guess she didn't want to start a rift in the family. I don't know, whatever.
But now we can talk about the guy that gets his head chopped off, because maybe the most satisfying moment in the entire show is, because you're just so used to just this good guys, and then they get the bad guy to the point of the sword, and the bad guy's like, you can't kill me, just banish me. And then they banish them off to create problems tomorrow. And I'm like, wait, no. Like, this guy, like, murdered people, leveraged people, blackmailed people, tortured people, and because you're the good guy, you're like, you know what, I'm gonna banish you with all of your soldiers to the corner of the kingdom so that you can go plot some more. No! Off with his head. And I was like, oh man, I just feel this one's gonna be different. I just feel it in my bones. Like, he stabs him and it's just like, he's down at his knees, and then he took his helmet off. I'm like, this guy's gonna lose his head. And I was so happy when it happened. So much joy for 10 seconds of screen time.
You don't understand. Like, literally, he was watching it, and then his toes started dancing.
Oh, I was giddy like a schoolgirl on prom night. Like, I was just like, oh, we go get it. This guy is not in a mercy, because that's what I really liked about it, is he's looking at this piece of shit, and he's like, I am not in the mood for mercy. And it's like, you shouldn't be in the mood for mercy after all you've been through, and what this guy did to your dad, and what this guy has done to the kingdom, and all this conniving just for power for himself. Because he felt wronged. I should be the emperor, boo-hoo-hoo. And I'm like, no. Mercy is not what I'm dishing out tonight. Cold, hard steel is.
God, you're such a nerd.
It's so good.
Oh, yeah.
Like,
yeah.
that lifted this whole thing a full letter grade. Like, if this was a B minus, it turns to an A minus immediately when that dude's head hits the floor.
Yeah. I liked what he said, which was like, this sword doesn't know you or whatever.
Well, he's like, I'm not my dad.
Yeah.
He's like, he was trying to play on his virtue and like, oh, your dad was this teacher and he was this, benevolent soul who cared about humans. And he's like, guess what? That ain't me. I'm a petty bitch and you losing your head.
Yeah.
I'm telling you, a lot of times these really lose me at the ending, and they made some mistakes in the ending here. But as far as the dispatching of the bad guy, one of the more satisfying, like, ways that the bad guys are dealt with in this, with the husband, and with the big bad, like with the general, like I'm just like, yes, like as they were like kind of falling.
It's literally so the husband like, jumps off the wall and he hits the ground, right? And literally both of us were like, don't look back. And it was like, and Ryan's like, this is such a good shot, right?
Well, she's walking away as it's in the shot. She's walking away, whether it's CG or it's wires or whatever, like it's really done. It's well composed as he's falling off the big high wall at the gate. And I'm like, wow, that's a great shot. And he goes splat, and she kind of pauses for that moment.
And we're both like, don't look back, don't look back, don't look back.
Don't look back. We said at the exact same time, too.
Yeah.
And I was like, and she doesn't.
Yeah.
And she's just like, nope, I know what just happened, and I don't care enough to look back.
Yeah. And I was just like, that's so fucking satisfying. It's like, yeah!
Yeah. That part of the ending was so satisfying. The dispatching of the end of this story, I would call it, is so incredibly satisfying.
Yeah. This drama has faults.
Well, yes. I mean, that's what we're going to get into now. Yes. Is the problemos?
Well, the problemos, yes. And it actually starts really early on. Like, I think the tone is very uneven in this drama. And even when I was, like, watching it and I was telling my friends, I'm like, I love this drama so much. I can't get enough of it. But it has some tone issues. And it's, like, very early on. Like, it just has some, like, really corny, cheesy parts in it that I think either they just think is really cool or they just wanted to do it for shits and giggles. I don't know. So, like, even, like, in the first part where, like, she digs herself out the grave, they do it in that, like, Carrie way.
The classic horror Pet Cemetery.
Yeah, where, like, the hand comes popping out of the gravel kind of thing, or the dirt, and it's just, like, the thing is, they didn't shoot it very well in the first place. It was too long. They put too much attention on the grave before it happens. And then the dirt was, like, too soft. And it just didn't have that impact of, like, the pow, But it was, to me, like, that image would have been so much better if she's really just, like, fighting tooth and nail to get out of this grave and really, like, clawing her way out. And you don't even need to see, like, anything else other than the hand come up and just, like, dig her fingers in and just, like, pull the dirt back. Like, I think that would have been grittier. It would have been more significant. It would have been stronger. And it would have shown her, like, what's the word? Determination. And it's just that other scene where the hand pops out of the dirt. It's like, it's been done so many times, like millions of times. Like, why not reinvent yourself a little bit and not do that, So
I would have rather seen it almost from her point of view, where it's pitch black and you can hear her, like, struggling for breath and scraping, and almost as an audience you're, like, blind with her buried alive as, like, she's and, like, scraping and clawing and, like, kicking and just all of a sudden there's a piece of light that comes through as she's kind of scrambling to the surface. Like, something that made us feel that moment rather than, hey, so let's do that classic, hand out of the dirt. I mean, it's used so often, it's now parodied. Boy, that's a stupid word. But like, you know what I mean? Like it's a joke now, so you really can't do that shot in earnest.
Yeah.
Because it's been used so often, it's kind of a joke on its own. I don't understand that choice.
Yeah. The same joke of like when someone dies and you like fall onto your knees and like scream to the heavens, like that's such a joke, you know. And honestly, like they kind of did it in this one too.
Oh, I've been on set where directors have wanted to like do the top shot where the person like drops to their knees and then the shot's directly down as they look straight up into the camera and then the camera cranes away as they go.
Yeah.
I'm like, no.
By far the worst version was like the Wolverine movie.
Oh my god, I've forgotten about that.
That was
That's a good
freaking
one.
awful.
Yeah.
But like it's such a joke, and they also had this in this movie when the little maid dies. But like just like things like that just doesn't fit in how good this drama is. They just put it in. Like their comedy was like super off in terms of like the two maids that were sent by the stepmom to like, you know,
knock her out with the incense or whatever, right?
yeah, but like all before that, like just like they were so stupid, and then like but they were like supposed to be comedy relief.
Yeah, it was Scooby-Doo. Like, here we are. Like,
yeah.
It's just like, what?
And so it just didn't match the tone. And then like
Well, I would say about that, like, I think they understood this was a very dark subject. And like, the show was dark. So they were looking for opportunities to lighten it. So it's not just all dark and depressing. I get the instinct. The execution was just really wrong.
Yes. I agree that it needed, you know, the comedic parts in it to kind of pull you away from like how dark and scary, you know, emotionally scary this drama is. It's just so over the top, like slapstick, cheesy, corny comedy. And like it almost is like, oh, am I now watching a Stephen Chow production? Because it's so like Molito. And then I'm just like, what? So Molito is Stephen Chow's signature style of comedy, which is like kind of like was it Airplane?
Yeah, it's parody. It's you know, very kind of on the nose, acknowledging the joke to the audience as well as to the characters. Like the characters are kind of in on the joke sometimes.
Yeah. Because
it's so ridiculous. Like yeah. No, but it doesn't belong here, and I think there's a way to do comedy in these things. I mean, you know, shows, like we mentioned Game of Thrones at the top, like shows that are even that bleak find ways to have comedy, but they find the comedy in the tone of the show. You know, it becomes dark humor. It becomes, you know, the drunk scene at the bar where, you know, everyone decides, you know, that they're going to sing a drinking song and they make up a funny drink. You know, it's like consistent with the characters you have. And like, this was kind of like buffooning some goofy like side characters, especially when they're like villains and they're like tiptoeing around doing bad things, but then they're also the comedy relief.
Yeah.
Like you're undercutting your tension here.
Yeah.
Like, what are you doing?
Also, like, I had a really hard time with the scene in the archery scene at school, like the archery competition, and then it was like the opposing team like doing this like, it's like, you know, when you talk shit to the other team.
Yeah.
Right? And it's like and then like our team of like the foursome here, like talking shit back, but it was so out of place and so out of character for all of those characters. And I'm just like, this does not fucking belong here. The tone is all messed up. It's just so like, I'm like, do you even know what you're filming at this point? Like when I see these scenes and that one government official that keeps like doing the Chinese opera style, like as stuff is happening.
Yeah, I was like, what's going on with this? Like, I understand it's opera, but why?
Yeah, and I'm just like, this is so off. I don't get it. Like, why do you think this is necessary? It just, yeah. So a lot of issues with tone, in my opinion. I personally think that since there is 3 directors, I think one director was in charge of comedy, and he really dropped the ball.
maybe, but the rest of them had to agree that that's what they were going to do. Like, you're not just sending a director out on his own being like, hey, Chad, like, go direct these scenes. And he's like, okay, guys. like they had a plan. It was just, I mean, it was in a script somewhere.
Yeah.
It was bizarre. I mean, it's just a bad choice.
Yeah.
When it comes down to it. And I think, you know, somewhere along the line, they were like, hey, we got to inject some comedy into this. And they just did it badly. And lesson learned, hopefully, because it just was the worst part of the show.
Yeah.
I mean,
it just didn't match. Very uneven. And then the biggest problem, in my opinion, is they should have just ended it early. Like, I don't understand why it was necessary for him to show that last battle, you know, where he's like, you know, his two, you know, left and right sidekicks die. And then I think they're trying to say that he didn't die. I don't even know.
I think they're trying to have their cake and eat it too. I think he died or he didn't die, and either, because like they have the scene where he's like combing her hair, but then he's not really there.
Yeah.
And then when he's riding up on the horse and she looks, like, you don't get to see her point of view, and so you're like, it could be the same as the hair combing scene where he's not really coming, or he is really coming and it's a happy ending, and you get to decide as an audience member. Like, my problem goes to it's not a different place, it's the same place, but just the war in the North against this army that's mentioned a handful of times isn't our story. That isn't what this 40 episodes is about. It's such a tangent. So why are we watching it? Like, our story ended half an episode ago. And then he goes off to fight a bad guy we don't care about. A struggle we don't care about.
I mean, even if this were to happen, right, in, like, reality, right, I understand in reality he would go off and, like, settle the unrest and the shit that happened, you know, and then, like, this other country's gonna, like, fight back and attack and stuff. I understand that in reality that would happen and he would have to go off. But we don't need to see it.
Well, it's not our story. That's not the bad guys are dead in our story. The bad guys all died. They won.
Exactly. And so, like, it's like, think of Cinderella, right? It's like, she marries Prince Charming, and then that's it. We don't need to see, like, 2 months later when she's cooking breakfast for Prince Charming. You know what I mean?
And he's waking up with bedhead, and he's just not quite as good looking anymore.
Yeah, like, we don't need to see that shit. The story ended. Like, we don't continue to do this random shit. Like, it makes no sense whatsoever.
It does feel like people in this day and age are really afraid of happily ever after, like, because it's like, but then, and then, it's like, no more and then. It's done. The show's over. Like, end the show.
Yeah.
We could just say, and then they live happily ever after. Even if they didn't. It doesn't matter that our story's over. The stuff you've asked us to care about for 40 episodes has been resolved. And the rest of it could be attributed in, like, one line of dialogue. Like, well, we still have that, you know, I mean, honestly, they could have gotten married, and it's like, what's next? And it's like, well, we have a long way to go still. End of show!
Exactly. I mean, but the thing is, the king had already mentioned in, like, right before their marriage scene, is that he has to send Duke Su out, you know? And so we knew as an audience that that's what he had to do. Right? But we didn't need to see it. It's like, okay, marriage scene, great. He rides off, you know, to do whatever and end. It's just like, there's so many places that could have ended that wasn't like this random scene that was so out of place.
And I honestly felt like the last episode they just did a lot of base tagging. Like, they just ran around to every character and, like, tagged the base of, like, what's gonna happen to the cousin? What's gonna happen to her real dad? What's gonna happen to the... And I'm like, I actually don't care. Like, I didn't need the scene with her and the real dad and, like, gaining his memory or whatever. Like, I don't need that shit. Because, again, he's not really part of our story. Like she went and got him, but, like, as far as, like, overcoming the challenges of this show, his well-being doesn't mean anything. and the cousin like going off to the other town, and it's like, oh, when you got settled, we'll come, and visit you. And then the other guy's like, hey, I'm your older brother now. And like, they're just tagging and tagging and tagging bases that we just don't need. I'm like, it was like this need to like tie everything in a bow. And I'm like, I don't need any of these endings.
Yeah. Yeah.
I would have ended it with him riding out of the gate and her standing on the wall, and they share a look, and her little maid or whoever turns to her and is like, what if he doesn't come back? And she's like, he promised me he'd come back. End of show. That's it. Like, and you can, again, as an audience member, you can, if you like tragic endings, you can pretend he went off to war and died. And if you like happy endings, you can pretend he rode back home and they lived happily ever after. But why are we watching this battle scene? I'd have saved you a lot of money, this production, by not showing that battle scene.
Oh, I know. And the thing is, I mean, if you didn't have this battle scene, you could have shown more in the middle.
Yeah.
Because
put your money where you want it.
Because there are a lot of things that they had, like, cut in order to save time and, like, script and probably money. And then just to show this dumb battle scene. And I'm like, why? Like, use that time to, like, brought in maybe a couple, or maybe, like, where did that one lady come from?
Oh, I forgot about that. Oh, man, we have to talk about that. No, we don't.
Well, yes, Ryan and I had a very heated argument about where that lady that poisoned Duke Su back when he was a kid.
Well, yeah, the whole unfolding of his backstory, basically.
Yeah.
I just felt like it was disconnected. But, I mean, it doesn't really matter. I'll happily be wrong. But I'm not.
It wasn't necessary, in my opinion, that, like, to explain, like, where she came from, or, All
right, you want to go down this road? We're going to go down this road. Here we go. Here's my problem. Is that she has the scene where she learns Duke Su's backstory. Now, she has a dilemma on her hands, which is called Duke Su and Grandpa General don't get along. And so she has to figure out how to solve Grumpy Grandpa and Duke Su's rift. And then she just manufactures an old lady who just happens to, like, be able to just say, like, the 4 sentences that, like, oh, and by the way, here's something I've been holding on to for 30 years. Like, I'm like, it's just so...
It's been 10 years.
Okay, fine, whatever, 10 years. But it's been, like, it's so convenient to the narrative. Like, they needed someone to, like, bridge this gap. And she has a scene with the grandpa, and she's like, oh, man, like, there's a miscommunication here. And then we don't see anything of her, like, being like, how do I solve this? And she just shows up with grandma exposition. And she's like, let me tell you what happened.
She's not that fucking old. God.
I don't care. But I'm just like, wait a minute, what? Who's this old lady? Where did she find her? What? Like, all of a sudden we just have the magic old lady that can solve the 10-year-old rift?
I'm just saying, like, you don't need to show, like, her climbing Mount Tai, like, just to go find this lady. Like, it's just the fucking grandpa knew where she was and told her.
But you
that
have
she
to acknowledge that, like, here's how I'm going to solve the dilemma. Like, all I want is just the barest acknowledgement that this is where the story is going to go next, because, like, she has a plan. Because she's been so good at planning. And I'm like, well, that just felt like you skipped some steps. Like, huh? Like, even if that lady was, like, in the flashback and she just kind of like, oh, I get it. Like, that lady might know some shit on the inside. Like, it's like an investigation. I don't want to see it. I don't want to see her, like, climbing the mountains and, like, moving, trees out of the way to find this old lady bathing in a hot spring. Like, I don't want that. But I was like, wait, who is this woman? And she's like, and it was the convenience of it, I think, for me. It's like, I was like, who is this person? Okay, fine. But then also, she just happens to hold all of the secrets in her hand that can solve the relationship between these two people that we need.
The secrets is not that big of a secret. It's literally, like, she poisoned him.
But it's a secret that repairs a fractured relationship that has been fractured for 10 years. Like, he hates this dude. And one conversation with this lady makes him go talk to the grandpa for the first time in the whole show. and you're just like, just fucking skate over that thin ice as fast as you fucking can.
Well, they had to save money so they could do this dumb fucking war scene at the end.
Why are we glorifying death like this? Like, I don't understand this need for, like, these tragic deaths. Like, oh, it's just so romantic that he goes off and him and his buddies die for his country, and she's left alone, like, to be a widow and, like, longing. Like, I don't understand the glorification of, like, longing. Like, I don't get it. Like, they worked really hard to be together. And if they have to sacrifice things because he has to go off to war and come back, I get it. But, like, the glorification of, like, oh, I'm just going to take this spear to the chest for my friends. I'm like, but it didn't mean anything, because this bad guy that you're fighting isn't the bad guy that we've built up in the show. It's just nameless, faceless army dudes. Who cares? And also, they sideline her and don't give her anything interesting to do. I'm just going to be a little old lady waiting at home for my husband to return. Like, that's not who she's been for the 40 episodes. She's been a badass.
Yeah. I'm like, really? Like, she can't do anything other than water a fucking tree for, like, what? How long does it take for flowers to grow on this tree? I don't know, like
care.
5 years?
Too long. Too long. But she's like, hey, so I've worked this hard to be this badass, like, you know, member of the court. And like, the dad is like, what are you going to do now? She's like, sit at home and wait for my husband. It's just like, yeah, get your ass back in the kitchen. Like, what? Like, that's not who she is. This is so stupid.
I'm actually surprised she didn't fucking go with him.
I was half expecting her to show up in the battle scene. I thought that's why we were watching it.
I know.
Like, I would have been satisfied with that too, where he's like on the battlefield and we damsel in distress him, and she shows up and shoots the dude with an arrow, and she's like, man, I'm always bailing you out. And it's like, okay, all right, they're the power couple, they need each other, I'm with you. But he died tragically in battle with his two right hand. Shut the fuck up.
Yeah.
Anyway, rant over.
Super unnecessary. And I was just like, it's like, why did you make this decision though? Like, I kind of wanted to be in the room and be like, I want to hear the reasoning behind why they think this was a good idea.
Well, and sometimes we talk about, like, the kind of censorship that happens, that, you know, if your main character has murdered a bunch of people or gone against the government or, like, overthrown the emperor, like, there's kind of a censorship thing that happens that, like, yeah, the censors kind of want that character to see justice, like the kind of the alternate ending to Infernal Affairs, where he kind of has to die because he's kind of a shitbag. But this, I don't quite understand. I mean, maybe it fits in that, but I don't see it, because they were defending their country, and they were pretty just in their violence and their planning. So I don't understand it from that standpoint either. And maybe I'm missing something, but it just, this should have ended half an episode early. And I don't need to see that. And then, it's like, no, they beat the bad guys. And then whatever else happened, I don't care.
Yeah. Anyway, even though with all the complaints, I thoroughly enjoyed this drama. I found it really good. The acting was amazing in it. I enjoyed most everything. I liked the characters. I liked how everyone did smart things. So for me, it is drinks on a pool deck.
So for me, this would have been onboard karaoke, because the ending is disappointing and the tone was kind of all over the place. But that beheading gets it a full letter grade upgrade to, what is it? What's the next one? In the buffet line.
In the buffet line.
Yeah, this one, that was just so satisfying to me. And there was so many things done right. Like, I just really enjoy when a show does things that other shows do wrong and they kind of get it right. And it's the small things. The bad guys not being cartoony, and the emperor not being a dumb shit, and the characters not being, like, overly annoying, and taking care. It really felt like they cared about all the characters in this show. Like, they really wanted to give everyone a point of view. And I really appreciated that. So for me, it's in the buffet line.
Yeah.
So we have a recommendation for this week?
We do. Our recommendation, as we talked about it before, is The Count of Monte Cristo.
Which is 9,000 pages, but...
It's so fucking thick, like that book. Oh.
It's a very thick book, but I will say, as a read, it reads very much like a screenplay almost, because he moves the story. He tells a lot of story in 960 pages or whatever it is. It's a long book.
The thing is, nowadays, it's not that much because, like, I'm reading volumes and volumes of, like, you know, the Husky and his...
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I think this one, it's, you know, for the time, it's a big fat book, and it looks daunting when you look at it. But the thing that struck me when I read it the first time was how quickly it moves, and how he literally is like, da-da-da-da-da, cut to 2 years later. And I was like, whoa, like this guy in 1844 did a cut to, you know what I mean? Like he just understood, like, no, I didn't need that part of the story. I think, and there's a reason this is a classic, and there's a reason it's been retold a million times, and it's been copied in a million times as well.
I mean, so many people have tried to do an adaptation of it. Not so successfully, I feel like.
No, they've done... I don't know if they've done a modern day adaptation because, like, they don't usually call them Count of Monte Cristo if they do a modern day. It's just sort of like they take and steal things from it.
Yeah.
But, like, they had the Jim Caviezel one, I think, was in the 90s or early 2000s that they'd made. It was... Period. It was, like, of the same, you know, French Renaissance or whatever. But, it's such a good story. And it's a story about friendship, and it's a story about, like, overcoming horrific odds, and it's a story about revenge in a very revengey way.
Yeah.
So I would definitely recommend it. And if you don't want to read 900 pages, get it on audiobook.
Yeah.
But it's extremely well written. Like, I'm not a huge fan of some of the classics. I've never been a huge fan of, like, Dickens, the way he writes. But Dumas, I'm all there for him. Like, it's just, I feel really, really, really well written.
And as Ryan had mentioned, that it was first serialized in 1840 and then published in 1844.
So Dumas was basically a web novelist.
Pretty much.
And then they came out with the omnibus.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, totally, like, ahead of his time.
No, so good. And it's written that way, and you can tell. And this is... He also wrote, like, the Three Musketeers, and, like... He's got a few massive pieces of literary work under... Yeah, a few web novels that did okay for him.
Yeah.
So check that out if you are into reading or listening to books. And it is so much of modern day storytelling comes from the Count of Monte Cristo. Like, and obviously he took, you know, things from the people before him as well. But there are a lot of stuff that you will recognize in this book as tropes from your favorite shows.
Yeah. And that is it for us. And thanks for listening. We will see you next week.
Thank you very much.